Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Daniel Williams and welcome back to another video. In this video, I will be sharing with you guys ideas I've had over the last 1 to 2 years as a teenager, and being a fan of Kamen Rider and Super Sentai and such, I have had these ideas balled up for a while and I just wanted to share them with you. That's all. Please enjoy the video. So without further ado, let's get it. The Hooded Riders. Technically not the first one I've ever done, but it nonetheless is the one that I started on. Very simple. Bad guys hear negativities, want chaos and domination, which the Hooded Riders have prevented them from doing that because of one specific reason. Changing the world. Literally. So, with that first notion out of the way, let's get into the second thing, which will be the characters of the show itself. So in the Hooded Riders, there are 7 in total, 5 actually being Hooded Riders, and 2 others that I will discuss in another video, but not right now. So let's start with the Hooded Riders, which is the main focus. So we have the Hooded Hunter, the Hooded Ninja, the Hooded Protector, the Hooded Princess, and the Hooded Samurai. Now, with all of these characters, 3 out of the first 2 were in order. So the first one is actually the Hooded Ninja, then the Hooded Hunter, then the Hooded Protector, Princess, and then Samurai. Now, their introduction is very spread apart within the show, somewhere from the span of episode 1 to about episode 25, 26 or so. And then we introduced to the other 2 riders, which I will explain very later. So our first Hooded Rider is Genesis, also known as the Hooded Ninja. And the Hooded Ninja will have sort of main character energy, but a little sassy with it. And this character specifically, though he will be there the most, and the very first one introduced, I do not want him to be the center of attention, though his personality says otherwise. Next on the roster, we have Steven, aka the Hooded Hunter. Now, he will be the second out of the 5 Hooded Riders to show up within episode 1 to about episode 25-26. Now, he is slightly more serious than the Hooded Ninja, and despite being best friends with them, I want there to be like a compatibility between Genesis and Steven to where they are more brothers than best friends. So, with that all being said, an important detail that is not entirely important, but it's one thing I want to address, is the spelling of his name. Let me show you. So, in most American names, they have a peculiar way to write different names. Let's use Steven for example. So we have Steven with a P-H-E-N, and then we have a Steven with a V. They still sound the same, though being spelled different. It's sort of like a homophone, so to speak. But our character here is almost, if not exactly, spelled like Steven with the PH. It's a Y instead of an E between the H and the N. So if you haven't already seen it, it basically looks like this. Why did I want to do it? That is a fun tale I won't tell you right now, but I thought it'd be interesting. So our next character in the roster is the Hooded Protector, aka Pedro. Now, for his hero name, it basically fits his name. The development of his character goes back to a recent memory of his that I will not explain right now, but in another video I probably will. As of right now, that is Pedro for you. So for our next character, we have the very first female hooded rider, but certainly will not be the only female hooded rider, and that is Talia, aka the Hooded Princess. Now, with that notation, the Hooded Princess will be introduced after the Hooded Hunter and before the Hooded Protector, not implying that that's how the order will go. Because so far we have the Hooded Ninja, the Hooded Hunter, and then the Hooded Protector. She's not necessarily in between, but before she becomes a Hooded Rider, that's when she's introduced, because I think it would be appropriate to introduce her and get to know her a little better before she actually becomes a Hooded Rider. Because with the Hooded Protector, he kind of was like right then and there, right when the episode is introduced, and I didn't want it to be that way, so to speak, or keep that going. So that's what I'm going to do with Talia, aka the Hooded Princess. And then finally we have our last Hooded Rider, which I want this one to be as interesting as possible. We have Michaela, aka the Hooded Samurai. Now, my plan for her entirely is her to be the convert, so to speak. And to further explain that, before she became the Hooded Samurai, she was a bad guy, or working for the bad guy, to begin with. With that, and when she becomes the Hooded Samurai, it's sort of like a build-up, so to speak, for like maybe an episode or two of her discovering what she's doing, the reason why she's doing it, and how bad it is, not only for her, but as well as for the people around her. And evidently a very special person that is very close to her. And with following that three-parter, there are a few things I do want to explain right after this. So within a three-parter for where she's introduced what I will call Finding Truth, because that sounds interesting, it's not necessarily like when she's introduced. This is more of like a couple weeks after she was introduced as the evil Kamen Rider, so to speak. And this is the path to where she builds up to feel like, hey, this is bad, not only for me, but as well as this other person that I just found out was not dead. Yeah, this one is sort of pretty crazy. So that's pretty much the heroes of the story. Now, real quick, I will go through the villains of the story. Now, these villains, I would say, are based off of like the Seven Deadly Sins, so to speak, but unfortunately, there are only 6 because that's how much I can brainstorm pretty fast. And just like that, I will get through them pretty fast. First off is Rage. Now, for his character, I want him to be more comedic, so to speak, because I don't want him to be all rage, moody, and downright will pick a fight with everybody, though he will do that here and there, but not as much. I wanted it to be like the sort of dumb villain in this case, and I want him to seem lovable, like he's a lover vices an actual villain. Granted, his reason to become villain, which I will explain later, doesn't make him valid to become a villain nonetheless. Next off, we have Depression. Now, this one, obviously, her character is very much so the reason she should have become a villain. But her character itself, or at least my plan for it, was her to be more of a shy person, and her goal is to have other people, or the villain of the episode, seek said comfort if she ever gets an opportunity to. If she ever gets an opportunity to. Gluttony, his character is more of a douchebag. Very much so like a douchebag. To where he is not only toxic to whoever he talks to, but is also very selfish and eats a lot. Well, actually, here's a better term: consumes a lot. Because depending on whatever it is, whether it be food, content, or anything of that matter, he will consume that and exceed it. So that's gluttony for you. Next is Rebel, who will be the ringleader. Now, with his backstory, he doesn't really have a in-depth reason to become a villain, so to speak. And though from his backstory it could be as if he can be a villain, I don't necessarily want to be a quote-unquote villain. It's more on the lines of he does what he does to pretty much follow the crowd, so to speak. And then we have this one, which we're going to skip over because this one's pretty good. Pride. How am I going to say this? Okay. The only way I can think of him specifically is more on the lines of a rich anime dude or an anime character who's flimsy, will show off everything, and doesn't necessarily think of you first. Not as selfish as Gluttony, but selfish enough to where you are a stinking guy, but you seem not as toxic to hang around with Vice's Gluttony, to be fairly honest with you. And then lastly, we have Fear. There's not much to talk about him, but he doesn't really have a reason, or in his backstory, it will seem like he will have a reason to become a villain. Honestly, as I'm thinking about it right now, his reason to become a villain is pretty freaky. It's pretty freaky. And for all the wrong reasons. All the wrong reasons to become a villain. The perfect villain. And now for this villain specifically, I want him to sort of, how am I going to say this? It's like an anime where certain people do stuff for a freaky, downright disturbing reason. That is my design for this character specifically. I won't get into much in depth about it because of time, but this was the negativities. And I'm calling it the negativities because I don't really have a better term for all of these. And initially, it's supposed to be in a negative sense. Not necessarily like 7 Deadly Sins type of sense. Though it can be negative at some point. Like rage could be negative. Depression could be negative. Definitely is negative. Gluttony definitely is negative. Rebellion, obviously. Fear, yes. Pretty much, yeah, you get the point. So it's sort of an exceeding version of what has been listed for today. Now, is that everything? No. And the reason I say that is because there is more to this show that I do want to show you, but I'm not going to show you it right now because I think it would be better to savor the moment if we were to, like, do separate videos about it. And so there's, like, more resources to go look forward to look forward to as the days goes on. Now, this show specifically is not the only one I have. And once I get done with the series, or let's actually word it better. Once I get done with like a few details that I would like to explain about the Hooded Islas, I will then move on to another one, and then goes on down the line. So as of right now, that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Have a blessed day.